My brother's wedding was the kind of event people post about for months. White tents sprawled across acres of green, chandeliers strung from beams, flowers everywhere you looked. I wore my only decent suit, pressed the night before with military precision, and tried not to feel out of place. Even as a grown man, something about family gatherings made me shrink into myself. It's funny how the people who know your childhood best can still make you feel 12 years old, powerless, and awkward. The Carter family had always been about appearances. My father, Thomas Carter, loved to tell stories of how he'd built his business from nothing, his voice swelling with pride at the country club or in front of investors. He liked to remind us, his sons, that success leaves clues, and that you could always tell who'd made it by their watch, their shoes, the car in the driveway. My brother Mark, the golden child, fit that vision perfectly. Law degree, expensive suits, teeth too white to be real. I loved him in my way, but we were from different worlds. I spent most of the reception on the fringes, nodding politely to aunts who barely remembered my name. Then, just as the champagne was poured, Dad clinked his glass for attention. He stood at the center table, broad and beaming, ready for another round of the Thomas Carter show. To Mark and his beautiful bride, he said, holding up his flute, "May you know the kind of success and happiness your mother and I built together." He paused, turning to scan the crowd. His eyes settled on me, a flicker of something sly in his smile. And to my other son, Daniel, who chose a different path. "We can't all wear $1,000 suits, soldier." The room rippled with laughter, some polite, some meaner. I kept my face neutral. I'd heard worse before, but this time, my father wasn't done. He leaned in, voice carrying just far enough for the nearest tables. "Who knows, maybe one day, Daniel will bring home a paycheck big enough for a wedding like this. Until then, he keeps the country safe so the rest of us can enjoy life, right?" Another burst of laughter, this time a little sharper, a little more uncomfortable. I felt my ears burning. For a second, I thought about saying something, anything, but the words jammed in my throat. My mother shot me a look, half sympathy, half apology, but she didn't speak up. Mark glanced away, embarrassed. I swallowed, letting the silence say what I couldn't. I stood there in my pressed suit, hands folded, letting the moment wash over me. Humiliation is a strange thing. It can make you want to disappear, or it can harden you in ways nothing else can. I chose not to react. I looked my father in the eye, nodded once, and said nothing. The rest of the evening blurred past in a haze of music and chatter. People congratulated Mark, posed for photos, gossiped about the honeymoon plans. I was present, but invisible, a ghost in my own family celebration. As the night wore on, I kept my dignity. I didn't let the jokes or the sideways glances change how I carried myself. That's what the Army taught me. More than anything, never show what you're feeling. Never give them the satisfaction. By midnight, I'd made my rounds and congratulated my brother one last time. As I stepped outside for a breath of fresh air, I realized I wasn't angry. Not really. Just tired. Tired of being the punchline. Tired of being underestimated by the people who should know me best. Still, I stayed silent. I refused to stoop to their level. The only thing I could control was myself. The wedding spectacle only grew more garish as the night went on. Waiters in black ties circled the dance floor with trays of aged whiskey and champagne so expensive the bottles had to be shown off before being poured. My father looked at home in the crowd, working the room with his booming laugh and iron handshake, beaming at every compliment. If there was a spotlight, he made sure he was standing in it. But even among the sea of expensive gifts and high society, the centerpiece was the cake. 5 towering tiers of imported chocolate and hand-sculpted sugar roses, flown in from a bakery my mother could barely pronounce. I overheard someone say it cost $5,000, as if that number itself were another guest, worthy of applause. It was in that overheated ballroom, the cake gleaming under the lights, that Dad found another opportunity to parade his status. He waved over a group of his business friends, men who all seemed to have the same perfect haircut, the same smug confidence, and began telling them how proud he was of Mark's career, the big firm he was joining, the honeymoon villa booked on a private island. My brother soaked it in, all smiles and grateful nods. Then Dad's tone shifted, a performative sigh in his voice. "Of course, not every son ends up in the fast lane," he said, loud enough for me to hear as I passed by. "Some prefer a simpler life. I guess Daniel likes the discipline, the uniforms. Not much money in marching around, but he's a good kid." One of his friends laughed, eyeing me over his glass. "Maybe he can stand guard at the door, Tom. Make sure nobody runs off with the cake." A couple more laughs. Dad shrugged, feigning pity. At least the army teaches you something about following orders. But I keep telling him success isn't just about hard work. It's about vision. Maybe one day he'll learn. The words stung, but the looks cut deeper, those quick, dismissive glances, like I was a curiosity rather than a son. I could have snapped back. I could have reminded them that I'd led men through things they'd never survive, that I'd held friends' hands as they died, that I'd carried burdens heavier than their briefcases. But pride kept my lips sealed. Instead, I just smiled and let the insult drift past, a ghost among suits and silk dresses. It was easier, I told myself, to let him have his moment. There was no point arguing values with people who measured worth by the height of a cake. Later, as the newlyweds made their rounds, I watched from a distance as Dad continued his one-man show, boasting about deals closed and vacations planned, always coming back to Mark. There was never a moment for me, never a word about my own achievements, not the medals, not the deployments, not the sacrifices. In his eyes, I was still just the quiet kid who never quite fit in. The cake was finally cut amid cheers and applause, another symbol of a family obsessed with appearances. I clapped along, blending in as best I could. Inside, though, I felt a growing ache, a silent realization that my father's approval was a prize I'd never win. Still, I kept my head up, refusing to let the night see me broken. That was my silent victory, however small. As the evening wore on, the lively chatter and laughter in the ballroom began to fade, replaced by the low hum of quiet conversations and the shuffle of guests preparing to leave. The golden glow of chandeliers softened into shadows, and the once vibrant energy grew heavy with exhaustion and satisfaction. The wedding that had been a dazzling celebration of wealth and family pride was winding down, but for me, the night had become a slow, painful reminder of where I stood in the eyes of those who mattered most. I lingered near the edge of the crowd, watching my family celebrate Mark's success like it was some untouchable kingdom. Their smiles were wide, but none turned to me. My mother's face was the only one that held a flicker of sadness, a quiet plea not to let the night end in bitterness. But no one else reached out. No one offered a word to bridge the widening gap between us. I thought about walking over to Dad, maybe trying to mend the invisible wall between us. But what could I say? Why do you pretend I don't exist? Or worse, why do you keep putting me down in front of everyone? The questions felt hollow, and I knew he wouldn't answer them honestly. His pride was too thick, his need to control the family narrative too strong. Instead, I decided to leave early, slipping quietly out the side door while the others were distracted by the final toasts and last dances. The cool night air was a sharp contrast to the heated ballroom, and I inhaled deeply, letting the crispness clear my thoughts. The silence outside was a balm, a small refuge from the unspoken judgments that followed me like shadows. As I stood there alone, I felt a strange mix of resignation and resolve. I wasn't angry, at least not yet. I was tired of the constant comparisons, the subtle jabs, the unspoken message that my service and sacrifices didn't count for much in the world my family cherished. But beneath that weariness, something else was stirring, a quiet fire, a determination that wouldn't be doused by their scorn. I thought about my years in uniform, the deployments, the long nights, the bonds forged in adversity. Those experiences shaped me in ways no amount of money or status could. They gave me a sense of purpose and honor that didn't need validation from a boardroom or a ballroom. Walking away from the wedding felt like leaving behind more than just a party. It was stepping away from a world that had never fully accepted me. But I wasn't walking away defeated. I was choosing a different path, one where I defined my own worth. As I disappeared into the night, I carried no bitterness in my heart, just a quiet strength in the knowledge that one day, the truth of who I was would speak louder than any insult or dismissal. Months passed after the wedding, and life moved forward with a rhythm that felt both familiar and new. I returned to my duties with renewed focus, burying myself in the challenges of military leadership and the relentless grind of responsibility. The Army wasn't just a job, it was my identity, the one place where merit mattered more than money or lineage. It was where I had earned every scar, every promotion, every ounce of respect. What my family didn't know, and what I never bothered to share, was that my career had been advancing steadily, far beyond what anyone expected. Behind closed doors, I had been entrusted with increasingly significant commands, managing missions critical to national security. I wasn't just a soldier, I was a leader shaping the future of the force. Then came the announcement. A formal ceremony scheduled in the capital, attended by military dignitaries, government officials, and key figures from both the defense and business worlds. It was where I would be officially introduced in my new role, Major General Daniel Carter. a rank few ever reach, and one that demanded respect. I knew my father would be there. His business connections and social status guaranteed it. It was almost certain he'd attend, oblivious to the fact that the quiet son he mocked as a lowly soldier had climbed higher than he ever imagined. I could have warned him, prepared him, sent a note or a call to soften the blow. But I chose not to. This wasn't about revenge or spectacle. It was about truth finally catching up, about letting the facts speak for themselves. I didn't crave confrontation. I only wanted the moment to arrive naturally, to see how the man who had belittled me would react when faced with the undeniable reality of who I'd become. The weeks leading up to the event were filled with preparation, briefings, speeches, protocol. I practiced walking into the room with calm confidence, knowing the weight of every step. I rehearsed the face I'd wear when the chairman introduced me, the silence I'd keep in the face of surprise or disbelief, because in that silence lay my strength. In that quiet dignity, I would reclaim the respect I'd been denied. I told no one in my family about the ceremony, not even Mark. It was my moment, not theirs. When the day finally arrived, I stepped into the grand hall ready to let the truth do the talking. The grand hall was a stark contrast to the warm, festive atmosphere of my brother's wedding. Here, the air buzzed with quiet authority, men and women in sharp uniforms and tailored suits, faces etched with the seriousness of responsibility. The polished marble floors reflected the solemnity of the moment, and every whisper seemed to carry weight. I stood just behind the curtain, my heart steady but my mind racing through the faces I expected to see. Business leaders mingled with military officials, exchanging nods of respect. I caught a glimpse of my father in the crowd, a few tables away, shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries, utterly unaware of the announcement about to change everything between us. The chairman, a tall man with a voice like gravel, stepped up to the microphone. The room hushed instantly. He scanned the crowd briefly, then focused his gaze on the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "it is my distinct honor to present a leader whose dedication, courage, and strategic vision have shaped the very core of our national defense." He paused for effect. I felt the weight of the moment settle deep inside me. "Major General Daniel Carter." The words hit the room like a thunderclap. Heads turned, eyes widening. The murmurs started low and quickly grew. Whispers of disbelief, surprise, respect. I could almost feel the collective shock ripple through the crowd. I stepped out from behind the curtain, every inch the officer I had worked years to become. My uniform was immaculate, my posture impeccable. I didn't need to say a word. The title and the presence said everything. I caught sight of my father's face. The smile he wore at the wedding was gone, replaced by a pale, rigid expression. His eyes locked onto me, wide and searching for an explanation he hadn't expected. Around us, the room shifted. Conversation stopped as people recognized the significance of the moment. For the first time, I was not the invisible son or the lowly soldier. I was Major General Daniel Carter, the man who had earned his place on his own terms. I took a slow breath, letting the silence stretch just long enough to speak volumes. No boast, no gloating, just quiet dignity. The chairman nodded toward me, and I stepped forward to accept the respect that was long overdue. The moment my father's eyes met mine, I saw the years of arrogance crumble in an instant. He stood there frozen, the color draining from his face as the truth settled in. This was not the son he'd dismissed as a lowly soldier, but a man who had risen through ranks and trials far beyond his imagination. His usual smirk vanished, replaced by a pale, tight-lipped expression that screamed shock and something deeper shame. For all his bluster and bravado, pride was what had made him cruel, and now it was the very thing that left him speechless. I watched as he struggled to process the reality before him. The son he mocked publicly was now the same major general who commanded respect from the most powerful figures in the room. The title he'd used to belittle me had become a symbol of honor and achievement. Around us, the crowd shifted. Some people exchanged glances, sensing the weight of this silent confrontation. But my father said nothing. No excuses, no hollow apologies. Just stunned silence. In that moment, I understood something fundamental. The wounds inflicted by pride cut deep, but humility is learned in silence. I felt no desire to rub the truth in his face. Revenge would have been easy. A sharp word, a public call-out. But I had long since decided that my worth would not depend on his recognition. I had fought my battles quietly, without need for validation. Instead, I held my posture steady and let the moment speak for itself. The respect I commanded wasn't a trophy to wave at him, but a testament to the path I'd chosen, one defined by discipline, honor, and perseverance. He finally looked away, the fight gone from his eyes. It was a collapse not just of ego, but of the illusion he'd built around our family. For the first time, I saw my father not as an indomitable figure of success, but as a man humbled by the truth of his own blindness. And though no words passed between us, the silence said more than any argument ever could. Standing there before the crowd, I felt an unexpected calm settle over me. The murmurs had faded, replaced by a respectful quiet that seemed to acknowledge the journey that had brought me here, not just the rank on my shoulder, but the years of sacrifice and resilience behind it. There was no need for a speech or grand gesture. The truth of who I was had spoken loudest in that single introduction. I didn't want to humiliate my father or make him feel small. That wasn't my victory. My triumph was far more subtle, rooted in integrity and quiet strength. I caught my brother's eye across the room. Mark looked away quickly, the pride on his face mixed with a new, complicated emotion I couldn't quite place. I wondered if he realized how thin the line had been between us all along, how different our definitions of success truly were. The room seemed to shift around me, the weight of past slights and unspoken judgments lifting, if only a little. I was finally seen, not as a shadow or an afterthought, but as the man I had become. As I moved through the crowd after the ceremony, people approached with congratulations that felt genuine, born of respect rather than obligation. It was a different kind of acceptance, one earned, not given. Later, alone, I reflected on the path that had led me here. The humiliation at the wedding, the silence I had chosen, the patience it had taken to let my achievements speak for themselves. It had all been worth it. Respect isn't something you demand. It's something you build quietly, brick by brick. I don't know if my father will ever fully understand what I've accomplished or who I truly am, but I don't need his approval anymore. I've already won the only victory that matters, staying true to myself, no matter the cost. And in that, I found a peace that no amount of wealth or status could ever buy.